If you couldn't tell from the title, I'm a police officer. I'm not going to say which department I work for, but I will say that it's in Massachusetts, for the sake of you all not losing your crap, trying to figure out where all this happened. I figure a little bit about myself couldn't hurt. For the sake of purpose, we'll say my name is Jack. No, this isn't my real name, but we'll pretend it is. I grew up wanting to be a cop my whole life. Nothing else interested me, except being a police officer. I've been a cop for almost 7 years now, and I have a wife and son. I work graveyard shifts in a small, urban town, a little while from Boston. Most calls I take involve junkies tweaking out and making an ass of themselves, or petty neighbors calling about trivial stuff that we can't get involved with. Only a handful of times have I been called on things like robberies and homicides. Anyway, last night I was doing my regular patrols, waiting for dispatch to give me something to do. It was around 1:03 a.m. when dispatch chimed in my ear during my lunch break. 251, come in. Great timing, guys, I thought before responding. Go ahead. We have a call coming from 5 blocks from your location about a homeless man in his mid-50s acting suspicious. You gotta be kidding, I thought before responding again. Copy. What's the address? She gave me the address, putting the call near an abandoned construction site, well known for being a drug and homeless hotspot. The address itself was in a poor neighborhood that consisted of trailer trash who were trying to build their new life. I walked out of the restaurant, burger in hand, and got on my cruiser before heading off to the address. When I arrived at the situation, the lady who had made the call was on her front porch, waiting for me. She was a frail old lady who looked like she had just seen a ghost. I got out of my car and I walked up to her, keeping my social distance before asking her what the problem was. In broken English, she told me that she was spoiling her grandkids with a late-night kids movie when she heard something hit the side of her home. When she looked outside, she saw an old man banging his head against the wall before crawling on all fours and twitching violently. At that point, she called the police and waited for us to show up. About 2 minutes before I arrived, however, the suspect got up and walked in the direction of the abandoned construction site. Great, I thought, still giving the lady my full attention. Another tweaker call to add to the books. I thanked her for her cooperation and turned to head back to my car when I heard her yell, "Wait!" I immediately turned back around to face her. She held up a finger, saying to wait for 1 second before she shuffled back inside her house as fast as she could, leaving her door open. As I waited, I saw 2 small children, no older than 10, peek around the doorframe to see me. I gave them a warm smile and waved at them, before they quickly disappeared from my sight. I sighed and I waited a bit longer, until the old lady came back out holding a small crucifix in one hand, and a small jar of what I could only assume to be water. She came down the stairs, approaching me as I backed up, telling her that we need to keep our distance. She told me to be quiet, calling me a dumbass under her breath in Spanish, before standing right in front of me. I towered over her, being just under 6 feet tall while she couldn't have been taller than 5'4". She held out her hand, offering me the small crucifix. It was a small carving of a cross with a crude Jesus carved into the front of it. She took my hand from my side and placed the cross inside, closing my hand into a fist. "For safety," she said before opening the jar of water and sprinkling me with it while saying what I think was an old prayer in Spanish. I don't speak a whole lot of Spanish, but I do know enough to understand what she was saying. She was blessing me for safety against all evil in this world, and the next while also praying that my family comes to no harm, which I thought was a little strange, but I shrugged it off before thanking her and walking back to my car. As I got in, I called dispatch and told them that I was headed to the abandoned site to investigate. "Do you want backup?" Dispatch asked. I responded, "Negative. That won't be necessary." And with that, I drove in the direction of the building, scanning for the suspect and putting the crucifix in the shirt pocket over my heart. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that religious objects can have positive effects on the mind, making you feel more calm and secure. So I figured that I was just showing respect for the old lady by putting it over my heart. I scanned the roads and sidewalks for the suspect for what felt like hours before I came upon the abandoned construction site. Originally, the building was meant to be a 4-story low-income housing complex with the same layout as a hotel. After a year or two of construction, however, funding for the project was cut, and it had to be abandoned even though it was nearly complete, save for the plumbing and electricity. The site has been abandoned for over 5 years now, and had attracted druggies and transients, or homeless if you prefer. The building was barely lit up by the light poles along the street, and the chain-link fence that once kept people out was now bent and warped, allowing anyone to enter and exit as they pleased, giving it an eerie feel. Me and a couple of buddies of mine made jokes that it was the headquarters of a secret society that was plotting world domination. When I got out of my car, it wasn't the building itself that was the creepy part. It was the fact that everyone who was squatting there was outside with fear in their eyes. I turned on my body cam and approached one of the homeless people. She was a lady in her late 30s with an obvious heroin addiction, based on the apparent track marks trailing up and down her arms. I asked her what was going on, and she told me that there was a man on the 3rd floor who nobody had ever seen before and got scared. When I asked her why she got scared, she said that she saw a few people go to talk to him before coming back and acting like they had lost their minds. I tried asking her a few more questions, but she went silent after that. I made my way through the sea of people to the man who fit my description of the original suspect from the lady's house, and I questioned him about the lady, confirming my suspicions about him being the suspect. When I had questioned him further, he told me that he didn't remember why he went to her house and banged his head. He only knew that he felt like he was instructed to do so. I gave him a citation and told him to not go back to the old lady's house again, which he agreed to. After asking a few more people about the situation, I called in to dispatch and told them to send backup to take care of everyone outside, while I went in to investigate the strange man. I went back to my patrol car and retrieved my shotgun and a few spare shells before turning on my mounted flashlight, stepping over the now flattened fence, and entering the building. We had made multiple drug busts here in the past, so I was pretty familiar with the layout of everything as I swept the 1st floor and made my way to the interior staircase to the 2nd floor. As I kept making my way to the 3rd floor and sweeping the area, I kept tripping over scattered beer bottles and random stuff the people here left lying around, nearly eating it when I ran into a whole shopping cart of crap left in the middle of the hallway. I cursed under my breath, and I pushed it aside and made my way to the 3rd floor. Once there, I swept through each room, looking for this mystery man until I came across a locked door. I found this odd because every room I checked before this one was either open or unlocked. I knocked on the door and made my presence known, like calling out, "Please, open up." When I got no response, I yelled that I was coming in, and I kicked the door down. And okay, I feel like I should clarify something. Being a cop for 7 years, you see some disturbing stuff. I'm not going to go into detail about what I've seen in the past, but just know that it's pretty hard to make me feel disturbed. But what I saw in that room nearly made me crap myself. The room was completely pitch black, except for a tall, skinny man sitting in the middle, staring away from me. When I say that he was tall, I mean this dude was impossibly tall. He wore an old gray suit and his head was completely bald. If I had to guess, I would say that he looked like he was in his late 70s. I tried to illuminate the rest of the room with my flashlight, but anywhere that I shone my flashlight, the darkness just absorbed it. I began to feel a strong, primal sense of fear as my eyes couldn't look away from the man. My knees began to shake violently, and I could feel my heart rate go through the roof. I fixed my shotgun on the man and tried to calm myself down. This son of a gun must have had eyes on the back of his head, because as soon as I did, he began to slowly stand up, only making my paralyzing fear worse as I kept my sights on him. Once he was fully standing up, he slowly turned around and faced me, and I got to see what he really looked like. I can't even begin to describe what this thing looked like, but I'll try my best, so bear with me. I call it a thing because there was no way in hell that this was a human being. It was built like one, sure, but it was less of a man than it was a thing. The suit was old as heck and worn out, but it was still tight enough that I could see its bones sticking out. Its skin was light gray and was covered in burns and blisters, like it had just walked away from a nuclear explosion. And its face, hell, its damned face. The poor thing really looked like it had been born in Chernobyl. Its eyes were the size of light bulbs, and were pure white with a small black dot as pupils. Its nose consisted of a triangular hole in the center of its head, and the mouth, God, just thinking about it makes me want to curl up in fear. Its mouth was massive. The mouth alone took up half of the thing's head, and the teeth. They weren't sharp and long like some messed up Stephen King monster. In fact, they were normal teeth. The problem was that it had too many. Its mouth was full of teeth, and when it smiled, that's all you could see. By now my hands were shaking with the shotgun still pointing in the direction of the thing, though I couldn't tell if I would even hit anything if I had pulled the trigger. It looked me dead in the eyes with those ghostly looking eyes, and it smiled. And when I say it smiled from ear to ear, I mean its smile went from ear to frickin' ear. Suddenly, through all my fear and panic, I heard it speak. "Hello?" Its voice sounded like that creepy YouTube video that everyone was obsessed about a few years ago. What was it called? Salad Fingers. This thing sounded like Salad Fingers, with that childish British accent. I was shaking with fear at this point, and wanted to run like crazy, but I couldn't move. All I could do was look at this lanky thing as it spoke. It raised one of its arms and pointed at me with a long, bony finger before saying, "Are you here to take me away?" I had no idea what the heck to do. Before I could think of something, I had already responded to this thing. Who? It finished my sentence before I could stutter it out. "Who am I?" it asked, tilting its head to the side. I slowly nodded before it answered my question. "Nobody that you would care to know. Nobody cares to know me. Nobody cares about me." It trailed off, mumbling nonsense and whimpering under its breath, no longer paying me much attention. Finally, I found enough strength to snap out of my fear-induced paralysis and began backing out of the room. I probably only took 2 steps before the floor creaked under my weight, sending the thing to snap its head in my direction, looking at me with a look I can only describe as pure rage. This thing didn't have any lips, but I could tell that it was snarling as it shot right in front of me, putting the barrel of my shotgun directly on its lower abdomen. It was at this point that I realized that the inky darkness covering the room was coming from this thing that was now towering over me. I looked up to meet its gaze, only to see pure hatred in its eyes as it spoke once again. "Don't leave me like the others did." Its voice was a mixture of hatred, desperation, and fear. I responded, "No way, asshole," before I pulled the trigger and dumped a slug into this thing's stomach, causing him to stumble backward. I quickly bolted out of the door and down the hall towards the main staircase. As I ran, I heard it scream and start slamming into walls, chasing after me. I could tell that it was pissed and it was gaining on me, but I didn't care. I was just a few feet away from the stairs, but this thing was closing the distance fast. Right before I entered the staircase, I racked my shotgun, putting another slug in the chamber, turned around and dumped another round down the hall. But when I looked down the hall, where I'd just shot, where I had heard this thing barreling towards me with murderous intent, there was nothing. There was no sign that anything had chased me. Was I hallucinating? Who gives a crap? I told myself. Let's just get out of here before we find out. Not giving it a second thought, I raced back down the stairs and out of the building, where I was met with multiple squad cars and officers looking intently at me. The next few hours are a blur, but I do remember having to talk with paramedics and telling other officers about what had happened on the 3rd floor. Naturally, nobody believed me, and when we reviewed my body cam, we found that I had turned the dang thing off by accident halfway through my sweep of the building, so there is no real proof of what I had seen, other than the testimony of a few tweakers. I was put on sick leave for the next 3 days to regain my thoughts, and I got sent home early, being told not to worry about writing a report. When I got home, it was roughly 3:20 a.m., so I made my way up to my room, where I was met with my wife sleeping soundly, before quietly taking off my uniform to change into sweatpants and a shirt. As I took off my shirt, I noticed that the crucifix the old lady had given me was missing from where it sat, over my heart. I shrugged it off as me just losing it in my car, or somewhere else, and I got in bed with my wife. She shifted slightly before falling back asleep, to which I followed her into the world of unconsciousness. When I woke up the next morning, I immediately hugged my wife and son before telling my wife everything that had happened last night. She didn't believe my story, but she said that she believed that I believed it. Whatever, it's not like I need anyone to believe me anyway. I know what I saw, and that's good enough for me. A little later in the day, I was helping my wife tidy up her room when I came across something sitting on top of our dresser. It was the crucifix. I thought that maybe my wife had found it on the floor and left it here for me. But there was a note next to it. When I opened it and read what was inside, I became overwhelmed with the same fear I had felt when I first saw that damn thing. Inside was 4 simple words, but they held horrific meaning that makes me fear for my family's safety and caused me to write this in the first place. Please, don't leave me.